Today I'm going to tell you the story of how one man upended an ocean's balance of power and put the smallest European kingdom on the world stage. So knowing that, maybe it's about time you found a real job, you fucking losers.
Hey there, toots. Afonso Albuquerque is a man who is worth knowing for his actions, and the actions of the soldiers under him have left a mark on the world, either directly or indirectly. And after this video, I do encourage you to look up the topic in further detail if you're interested, as these videos are in essence just introductory level videos. But in any case, let's talk about Daddy Albuquerque. Afonso Albuquerque, in Portuguese pronunciation, was born in 1453 in the town of Alhambra. Try and write that one down properly. He was the second son of a lord, and he maybe was related through an illegitimate line to the ruling dynasty, and he became good friends with King John II. He was educated in math, prose, and in Latin, and as he grew older, he was involved with the conquest of Tangiers in the town of Erzurum in Morocco. This man even went off to the Italian peninsula to fight off the Ottomans. This man spent a lot of his early military career either in charge of garrisons along the Portuguese-Moroccan territories or taking part in assaults somewhere else, and thusly, we can guess that during this time he developed his skills as a military leader that would allow him to leave his mark on history.
And during the reign of King John II, our perfect prince, god damn it, not again, not that one. Finally, Afonso Albuquerque enjoyed a rather privileged position in court, in large part due to his friendship with the king. The king, however, died at the age of 40 and was succeeded by Manuel I, who had a much more cautious attitude towards Afonso, as, of course, he was 17 years older than him and was close to Manuel's predecessor. And I also suspect, though I can confirm it with any proof, that the king may have seen him as a threat to his rule, as 8 years later, Afonso would be sent on his first expedition to India along with his cousin, a trip which, at the time, was still very dangerous.
This expedition was the fifth Portuguese armada sent to India since Vasco da Gama's first trip there. This armada was made up of 9 vessels, with Albuquerque personally commanding 3 of them. However, and as you might expect, the journey to India ran into several issues. The ships got lost repeatedly, and navigational errors caused the entire fleet to scatter at one point. And the fleet had to spend several days looking for each other, while some others simply decided to continue the journey alone to India. One of the squadrons in this fleet, which was made up of 3 ships, already a significant amount of the fleet's vessels, completely gave up on the job and just spent the entire year traveling up and down the east coast of Africa, mapping a lot of it and demanding tribute from local lords in the east coast. But anyways, this expedition had a much more different goal than Vasco da Gama's first one. You see, the goal was no longer to get spices and get rich. The goal was to defeat the King of Calicut. The expedition of Pedro Alvares Cabral, which I may talk about in a different video, I don't know, stay tuned if you want to listen to more ramblings of a madman though, was an expedition that unfortunately started a conflict with the top man of Calicut. And while the 4th expedition was intended to fight Calicut, it did have the unintended effect of giving the head honcho of Calicut the chance to close the technological gap that existed in the Portuguese favor. as two Italian men had left the fourth expedition's fleet and joined forces with the bigwig of Calicut. This was a problem since these men were highly skilled military engineers, and this fourth expedition returned far too late to affect the fifth expedition, Albuquerque's, goal. So now we have the commander-in-chief of Calicut, who is in an open conflict with Portugal and has two military engineers on his side working to close the technological gap. And all Portuguese has to deal with this is 6 vessels. The missing 3 were pretending to be pirates in the east coast of Africa. So it seems fair to say that despite the ongoing war in India, the king expected Afonso's trip to be a simple one. Vasco da Gama's last expedition was made up of 20 heavily armed vessels, but failed to secure a peace agreement with the Lord Almighty of Calicut. So, around the beginning of April to the month of May, Albuquerque's expedition departed from Lisbon and sailed southwards to Cape Verde. There, they, like Vasco da Gama before him, abandoned the African coast and sailed into open seas. They found a small island, which they renamed to Ascension Island. Its old name was the island of Conceição. I think that translates to Conception, I'm not sure. However, at Cape Verde, the 3rd Squadron, the one that raids the east coast of Africa later on, winds up stuck in a storm, and instead of following Albuquerque, they sail into the island of Saint Tomé in the Gulf of Guinea, even losing track of another one of their own vessels. However, the first 2 squadrons arrived, if in a haphazard way, in the Indian Ocean, and docked for some time at the town of Morindi, an ally of Portugal. However, with the 3rd Squadron still not having arrived, and the Armada itself being late on arrival, the 2 squadrons decided to leave and not wait for the 3rd Squadron's arrival. So, at this point, Portugal had 2 allies in India. And if anyone from India sees this video, I am sorry for what you're about to hear. Cochin and Cananor, and as expected, Portugal bombing Calicut shore indiscriminately and making friends with 2 other nations didn't sit well with the Jedi Master of Calicut, especially because Cochin was nominally a junior partner of Calicut, meaning a nation ruled by a member of the family of Calicut, who by allying with Portugal was now on the boss of Calcut's hit list. And indeed, the man sent an army of 50,000 soldiers into Cochin and immediately demanded that the lord in the city hand over all of the Portuguese merchants there. Obviously, there was a siege. And soon after, a part of the 5th Armada finally arrived at India, and the besieging forces, fearful of Portuguese retaliation, apparently routed, and the king of the 7 kingdoms of Calicut was forced to withdraw home. Soon after, with the 5th Armada now mostly at India, a brief period of peace settled between Calicut and Portugal. This peace outlined an end to the spice blockade that Calicut had been enforcing, and also forced the Lord of the Tides to give up several crates of spices to Portugal. However, as the shipment was being given to Afonso's men, a skirmish broke out between Calicut soldiers and Portuguese ones. So, as you can expect, the blockade was reinstated. In the end, Albuquerque found a way around this blockade by making a deal with the Queen Regent of a place called Quiron to the south. You see, at this point in time, the Portuguese state of India was already formally established. There were multiple factories that the Portuguese had control over, spread around the southwestern end of the Indian subcontinent. And the first governor of this state was Francisco de Almeida. He would die soon after his appointment from injuries, fighting the Mamluks in the western end of the Indian Ocean. He was succeeded by Afonso de Albuquerque.
King of Portugal has often commanded me to go to the Straits, because this was the best place to intercept the trade which the Muslims carry on in these parts. So it was to do our Lord's service that we were brought here. By taking Malacca, we would close the straits, so that never again would the Muslims be able to bring their spices by this route. I'm very sure that if this Malacca trade is taken out of their hands, Cairo and Mecca will be completely lost. Afonso's governorship of India was a bit of a violent one, but violent in more the sense of glorious conquest. 1 year into his governorship, he conquered Goa, nearly vanquished the president for life of Calicut before nearly being vanquished himself.
It's important to remember that Portugal and Spain had spent about 700 years fighting the Muslims in the Reconquista. And once it ended in Iberia, well, Portugal never really stopped doing the Reconquista. As an extremely Catholic nation, a lot of Portuguese kings considered themselves to be in an active war with the Muslim world. Granted, it was not just us, but other kingdoms. It is also important to note that Portugal was going around India and Asia taking over the spice trade because A, the Muslims had control of it and were making bank off of it, and B, if you're fighting your enemy and he has a big vulnerable source of income, well, then you're going to take it like the good Catholic boy you are. So a lot of their actions here can be understood in that fashion. We're fighting the Muslims to get rich from this trade, so we'll take it in making poor and ourselves rich. And from this trade route, Portugal found a vital choke point where they could seize the route: Malacca. Malacca sat on the strategic strait of Malacca, a strait that saw pretty much the entire trade between China and India flow through. The plan to take it was twofold: from Manuel, the king, and Albuquerque. Seizing it set up a stronger foundation for the Portuguese state of India, which Albuquerque was building. And it also put the Portuguese closer to beating the Spanish to the far east, which is what the king wanted to do. But Portugal just needed a justification. People can't just take land, they need an excuse to do so. That's why I'm declaring the Florida Peninsula as rightful territory belonging to me alone. Because God. Oh, and because you Americans clearly don't know how to live there. But the justification for it would come, and it would do so in the hands of a friendly Hindu merchant.
This merchant alerted Albuquerque to the fact that the Sultan of Malacca had arrested the Portuguese merchants who had arrived there some time ago. Thus, Albuquerque began assembling ships and troops from whatever source he could gather. The Sultan of Malacca himself expected an assault from the Portuguese to come at any time, and reportedly called for the support of all his vassals to send troops. However, a similar thing happened here that also happened in Calicut. The technology available was lagging even more behind that of the Portuguese, to the point that some of the men that the Sultan had available to fight were completely unaware of the concept of bullets and of cannons. After the Portuguese came to Malacca, then met each other. They shot the city with cannons, so all the people of Malacca were surprised, shocked to hear the sound of the cannon. They said, "What is this sound, like thunder?" Then the cannon came about the people of Malacca. Some lost their necks, some lost their arms, some lost their thighs. The people of Malacca were even more astonished to see the effect of the gun. They said, "What is this weapon called that is round yet is sharp enough to kill?" This quote is from a Malaysian chronicler, and it is fucking incredible. This man is basically describing what I'm sure we would describe the Combine's power if they were real and started the 7-hour war.
But yes, the Portuguese finally arrived, and the battle began on the 1st of July. Given how long this video is already aiming to be, I am going to skip a lot of the details here. but what you need to know is this. 20,000 men defended the city of Malacca from a host of 4,000 Portuguese soldiers, and Portugal won the battle. The following sack of the city was not very destructive, actually. Soldiers were ordered specifically not to harm the Chinese merchants and the population of allies who had helped in the fighting. Afonso then garrisoned the city and prepared it for a counterattack from the exiled Sultan. This conquest, while obviously not damaging the Muslims' world's economies, did give a ton of valuable money to Portugal, which would later be used to catapult the kingdom into one of the world's great powers at that time. Afonso Albuquerque himself would continue traveling all over the Indian Ocean and the East Indies, conquering more shit and serving as an ambassador to multiple great East Asian nations. He would later die of some kind of illness, I'm not really sure which one, and King Manuel, upon hearing of his death, bestowed upon Albuquerque's son as many honors as he could, out of respect for his father's accomplishments. Ultimately, Afonso's legacy is a complicated one. Me being a Portuguese and living in Portugal my whole life, I'll admit I do see him as a bit of a hero, and indeed that is how he is represented in my country's education and in the many books that we have available. He is the man that brought us to a golden age, unlike anything close to what the country had before or since. And so those imperialistic wars that he waged are put in a good light. Except, of course, for the last imperialistic war we fought, as there is no real way of shedding a good light on it, and it's because of that war that we kicked out our dictator and brought in our current government. Thank God. And I'm sure that you are watching this and live in, say, India, Malaysia, or hell, just say the name of any non-European nation Afonso put his grubby little mitts on, you probably have a far more negative opinion of Albuquerque than I do. Your country's education probably encourages it, as mine encourages seeing him and many other explorers as heroes. Thank you for watching. This project was quite fun to embark on, and I do plan on making more videos. Some of them will be about topics like this, or games as a topic. I've started writing a video on the Dying Light franchise after this video was posted, and I hope you stick around for that if it interests you, and I hope you've enjoyed these 3 videos, and I do hope you stick around for the next ones.